Hello. I just thought I would share this with you since we're working with the the writing Salvation. These are some responses that people turned in to their for this in previous years, and I saved these because these are some kind of pitfalls that people get into when they're responding to these. And so this is to help us develop good habits and to help us understand what kinds of responses are acceptable in this class, but also on the advanced placement test. So we're just going to go down the list here, and I will highlight these and we'll talk about each one. First of all, number one, use present verb tense to discuss events that occur in literature. So when you're describing something that happens in an existing piece of literature, you always want to use present tense to describe the events that actually occur in the story. So you would not say Romeo committed suicide or Romeo killed Tybalt, because those would be past tense, and those are events that actually happen in Romeo and Juliet. If it happens in the story, then you would use the present tense. You would say Romeo kills Tybalt, or Romeo commits suicide. Romeo and Juliet get married, not they got married. So the idea is that just because you finished reading the story or the piece of reading doesn't mean that it doesn't exist anymore. So you want to, the appropriate way to deal with that in literature is to use the present tense. Now, there's another reason for that. Whenever you're referring to events that take place prior to the events in the literature, then you would use past tense. So we know that Romeo and Juliet's parents had a family feud that's been going on for decades. Who knows how long it's been going on. But if you want to say, refer to something that happened before the events of the literature, then you would want to use the past tense. So think about something with like The Great Gatsby. We know that Jay Gatsby and Daisy had a relationship prior to the events of the story. So then you would use past tense. So it's important to keep our past and present tense verbs straight when we're referring to literature. Okay, so that's rule number one. Rule number two, make sure you keep your verb tenses consistent. When we speak in our casual conversations, we jump back and forth between past and present tense, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference, because if we need clarification, like with most face-to-face situations with casual conversation, we have the speaker and the receiver are right there together, and so the listener can ask for clarification. With a formal writing situation, your audience is not immediate. Your audience is not there. So there's no one there to really ask for specific clarification. So make sure you don't jump back and forth between past and present tense verbs. Don't say, I do this, I did that, I do this, I did that, and keep going back and forth and using those interchangeably. Okay, the next one, avoid phrases that begin with what, why, how, because and we'll take a look at an example of that. Don't say how he felt, or why he changed his mind, or what he was thinking. So don't say that, this sentence expresses what Langston Hughes was thinking, because you're not really specifying what he was thinking. This sounds like something that politicians do. I'm going to vote for this guy because of what he stands for. Well, what does he stand for, right? I mean, it kind of throws that back into the lap of the audience and begs the question. So we want to be crystal clear with our writing, and don't say how he felt, because I don't know what you're referring to. How did he feel? Specify how he felt, or why he changed his mind, or what he was thinking. Okay. Avoid ambiguous pronouns. Again, that's something that it's a huge block to communication, no matter what kind of communication you're engaged in. He, she, it, they, we, those are all pronouns. They take the place of a noun. The noun they take the place of is called an antecedent. And if there is not a clear connection between a pronoun and its antecedent, then the pronoun is ambiguous. We want to make sure that it's specified who he or she or it or they or we, who those pronouns are, okay? And that's just in any kind of a communication situation, but especially with these responses that you're going to be giving, and also on the advanced placement test and any other tests you might happen to be taking. Okay, pay attention to spelling and punctuation. Sentences end with periods. Observe comma rules. That's one of those things that separates the A students from everybody else. If your ideas are good, you've expressed your ideas, you've supported them and so forth, but your spelling is really sloppy and goofy, then you kind of hurt your ethos. So spelling does count. Okay, we've got all kinds of tools at our disposal to make sure that you do spell correctly. If you just decide not to, then you're kind of deciding not to get a very good grade. End your sentences with periods. You're not writing a text message, you are writing formal English. So please make sure you take care of that. Observe comma rules. There's a big section at the end of your grammar handout, the one that you just got last week, that deals with observing comma rules. Make sure that introductory clauses end with a comma. Make sure you put commas in lists of things. Okay, the next one, refer to authors by their last names. Do not call Langston Hughes Langston. You're not on a first name basis with him. You wouldn't call William Shakespeare Bill. He's not your buddy. He's not a guy you hang out with on weekends. The proper way to refer to an author is to refer to the author by his or her last name. All right. We're going to take a look at some sample sentences. His sentences have some very powerful words. This helps draw in the reader. Okay, that is kind of the generic answer that says not a whole lot. A lot of people are fond of saying, well, here's the rhetorical effect of this sentence. It helps draw in the reader. That's really generic and really kind of phony and kind of meaningless, because every bit of rhetoric helps draw in the reader. But I need you to be more specific with that. Okay, draw in the reader is not a rhetorical strategy. It's not a writing tool. It's not specific enough to really say anything. Besides that, his is a pronoun. This is one of those ambiguous pronouns, and unless there's a sentence prior to that that specifies who he is, then we don't know whose sentences. What are those very powerful words? Give us some examples of those powerful words and explain why they're powerful. So that's how you can get development into your responses. The author uses coordination to show a contrast between ideas. Well, if you're saying that, then you're not really understanding the concept of coordination. It's actually subordination that shows the contrast between ideas, because subordination means that it shows that some ideas are more important than others, and it shows the relationship among the ideas. Coordination is, that's the fanboys. That's the and, but, or, nor, for, yet. So, and those give equal weight to ideas. So there is not a contrast with coordination. Be careful that you know the difference between coordination and subordination. All right, let's take a look at this one. His aunt told him what would happen when he got saved. Okay, well, that kind of goes back to that phrase, what would happen. We have to be more specific about that. We need to say Langston Hughes' aunt told him, and then explain what would happen. Don't say what would happen as if we all already know. You have to make sure you specify with that. And if you use that kind of, or keep those kinds of phrases in mind anytime you're writing, it's going to improve your style. It's going to sort of force you to be more specific and not just throw out an idea into the reader's lap as if you know what happened. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Hughes had lost his faith and didn't believe in God. You have to be really careful about those kinds of assumptions, because nowhere in this piece does it say that Langston Hughes did not believe in God. It doesn't even refer to God, really. It refers to Jesus. And the last part of it says something about his thoughts about Jesus, but it doesn't say that he totally became an atheist and denied the existence of God. You have to be really careful about those subtle nuances. He had some doubts. He's 12 years old. He's thinking about how his his aunt and his relatives and everybody else at his church are perceiving their relationship with God and with Jesus and with religion, but this is his own personal idea. So be really careful about jumping to those conclusions. Let's take a look at the next one. The definition of salvation is deliverance from harm or loss. Okay, there is no such thing as the definition of anything any more than there is the dictionary, right? There are multiple definitions of words, so be careful about using that phrase, the definition of something. And this kind of tells me that somebody got this definition from somewhere. And you have to be really careful about that. So did you Google that? Did you look it up in a dictionary? And which dictionary? There are several different dictionaries, and there are several different definitions of any word. So be very careful about saying the definition of something is. Just because you happen to Google it doesn't mean that's the definition. Is deliverance from harm or loss. He doesn't really seem to care if he's saved or not. That kind of tells me that whoever read this piece didn't actually pay a whole lot of attention to it. He does care. He is super excited to be saved. He is super excited. There's lots of anticipation going on there. He's told by his friends, his relatives, that he is going to meet Jesus. So he's expecting, in his 12-year-old mind, he is expecting a literal Jesus to walk in the door and to speak to him, and that's not what he experiences. So that doesn't say the same thing as he doesn't really seem to care if he's saved or not. That doesn't really capture the meaning. So answering these questions requires some careful reading and some close and critical reading. And this kind of a statement says to me that the person didn't really read the passage and think about exactly what's being said. There's some assumptions going on here. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Hughes uses long, complex sentences when things seem chaotic. Okay, that sentence is only valid if you give an example of when things seem chaotic. There are lots of places in this story that we could sort of look at and say, there's a good example of something that Langston Hughes is perceiving as chaotic. But I'm not really sure where these chaotic incidents occur. So if you just kind of throw out a sentence like that, you really haven't supported it. You're expecting me to figure out what you mean. It's generic. It's too abstract. It could mean anything because it doesn't mean, or it doesn't mean anything because it could mean anything. One of those phrases. All right, let's take a look at the next one. It shows, okay, first of all, it begins with a pronoun, it. I don't know what it is. You have to be specific there. It shows the contrast between the events of the church and the thoughts that are running through his head. Okay. First of all, there are a whole lot of blanks going on here. There's the ambiguous pronoun. The events of the church. What events? You've got to specify which events we're talking about. Don't just throw it out there and expect me to figure out what you're trying to say. I can only read what's on the paper. I cannot read what's in your mind. So be very careful about that. The thoughts that are running through his head. What are those thoughts? You have to be specific about the thoughts, and you have to back it up with textual evidence, okay? The next one, the way it is written is very blunt. So if it sticks in the reader's head because of how abrupt it is, okay, I'm not even sure what that means. Give me some example of that bluntness. And not everything in this piece is blunt. There are some places in the story where, there's some very short fragments. There are some places where the action seems to come to an abrupt stop. But if you just throw out this sentence, very blunt doesn't specify that. So you've got to be careful about that. So if it sticks in the reader's head, and readers, it needs an apostrophe, it's a possessive. So be sure that you take care of that. In the reader's head because of how abrupt it is. Okay, that's circular logic. So it's very blunt because it's abrupt. Well, aren't abrupt and blunt sort of the same thing? So it's kind of like saying water is wet. Don't define a term by another term that means exactly the same thing. It was, if was, I'm not sure what that is, changed. If it was, maybe they transposed the letter, the words. If it were, it should be were because it's subjunctive. If it were changed, we would lose the blunt effect. Okay, changed from what to what? You've got to be, change could be a lot of things. Yet if he changes the sentence, he would show his skill. Boy, well, I think it should be obvious that, that doesn't really mean much. Somebody decided, they were in a hurry. There was a rerun of SpongeBob that they decided was more important than, giving a good answer or something like that. So it just kind of tells me that the person wanted to scribble down something and finish their homework and move on to other things. I do read these, so please be careful about that. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. He is very descriptive when it comes to events that take place and is setting up a great picture for his audience. All right, well, the author uses description, and description involves imagery, which is a picture. Again, it's just sort of this generic, abstract, circular logic. You've got to tie this down. Where are those descriptions? What are those events that take place? What is this great picture for his audience? You can't just throw that out there and expect to get credit for it. All right. By changing the sentence, you lose the dramatic effect of the period separating the contrasting thoughts. All right. Well, first of all, what is that dramatic effect? Again, there's sort of what I call fairy dust. It's just an empty phrase that sort of holds a place. And then there's the generic you. By changing the sentence, you lose. All right, well, who's changing the sentence? I'm not changing the sentence. You lose the dramatic effect of the period separating the contrasting thoughts. That needs to be a word that, or a phrase that I'm going to get us used to using, is to unpack that. Don't tell me, show me. Give me textual evidence. What are those contrasting thoughts? How does it separate the contrasting thoughts? Okay, hopefully you're getting a feel for what kinds of things we're after here with these assignments. Let's take a look at the next one. Hughes gains flow and rhythm by putting in conjunctions rather than being abrupt while writing. Wow, there's a whole lot going on there. Hughes gains flow. Well, first of all, please do not use the word flow in this class. Flow is not it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, there are lots of ways to make your writing flow, but that just kind of says that you really don't know the language of analyzing style and rhetoric. Okay, flow is not a real rhetorical term or stylistic term. Flow and rhythm, it kind of sounds to me like you're judging a song rather than a piece of nonfiction writing. So be careful about using these words that don't really mean anything. And of course, we're just getting started here, so I understand that we're starting from scratch. And but please understand that flow and rhythm don't really mean anything. Hughes gains those words by putting in conjunctions rather than, and I don't know what that means. First of all, we've established that there are different kinds of conjunctions. There's coordinating conjunctions, the and, but, or, for, nor, yet, and so. And then there are subordinating conjunctions, and there are lots of those: because, after, while, during. And if you're not quite sure what the difference is between subordinating and coordinating conjunctions, please look that up, okay, because it does make a big difference. And putting in conjunctions rather than being abrupt. I don't see those two things being mutually exclusive. You can be abrupt and still use conjunctions. I'm not quite sure what the writer's after there. All right, let's take a look here. Well, we've got to know who he is, right? He uses vivid words to describe the scene and atmosphere of the revival service, such as rhythmical knickerbockered legs and work-gnarled hands. Okay, so that one, we got to give them a little bit of credit here because the vivid words are here. We have textual evidence, although rhythmical is misspelled. But what do we mean by vivid words? Like, in what way are they vivid? This is the question that asks about diction. And don't just say words are vivid. What's going on with those words? Like, how would you characterize work gnarled hands and knickerbockered legs? What does that do? What is the impact on the audience? Yes, they're vivid, but let's be more specific about how they are vivid and how that contributes to the atmosphere, the revival service. Okay. The next one, the variety of Hughes's sentences conveys the tone. Okay. What is that tone? The variety conveys the tone. Nothing about what the tone is. There are lots of different ways we can describe tone. Let's break that down. Let's unpack that. Let's open it up and make it say something. Conveys, and how does the variety convey the tone? I'm not really sure what that means. And the turning point about Hughes's thoughts of his faith. Okay, there we go again. What are Hughes's thoughts about his faith? You've got to be specific there. All right, we're almost done here. Let's take a look at the next one. The essay would of, oh my goodness, use formal English here, folks. The term is would have lost the dramatic feel that predicted, and here's one of those phrases again. It starts with what it was going to be like. Okay, first of all, we don't know what it is, and there is no response to what it was going to be like. What was going to be like, and I'm not even sure what that means. So that's a really empty phrase there. And then it is an ambiguous pronoun because I'm not sure if this it is being defined, or the antecedent of this it is this it. And when you've got one pronoun and the antecedent of that pronoun is another pronoun, I call that pronoun inbreeding. And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure there's a clear antecedent going on, okay? It gains another coordinating conjunction. I don't know what that means. So be clear in your responses. Make sure they make sense. You might even want to double check and share your responses with your classmates. Make sure they make sense, because I do read all of these. Okay, we can't get away with the sort of the freshman and sophomore style throwing something out there and giving it a good shot. It really has to make sense. All right, let's take a look at one more before we knock off here today. Hughes's diction was strong and used sets of imagery to show the atmosphere of how chaotic the church setting was. Wow, that is a mouthful. His diction. When you're talking about diction, you're talking about word choice. And if you're going to talk about word choice, you have to give specific words and not just throw out his diction and then I'm supposed to go and find those words, those strong words. Give examples of those strong words. And in what ways are they strong? Are they emotionally strong? Are they do they convey, what kinds of connotations do they convey? So his diction was strong. Again, this is what we were talking about with the past tense. No, the piece still exists. So his diction is strong and uses sets of imagery. Well, let's take a look at some examples of that imagery. Don't just tell us that there's strong imagery. You've got to give textual evidence, or you're not going to get a whole lot of points. To show the atmosphere of how chaotic the church setting was. Okay, there's a lot of words going on there. We can probably say that much more simply. The chaotic atmosphere in the church. I don't know, it just seems really wordy and sort of convoluted and zigzags rather than getting straight to the meaning. His diction showed, again, past tense, we want to say shows, not only the setting. Okay, diction doesn't really show setting unless you give specific examples. How does that happen? But the feelings of the people inside the church. Okay, there we go again. What are their feelings? Don't use this phrasing that begs the question. Okay, be very careful about that. Especially his own feelings. And now, not only do we have feelings here of the people inside the church, but now we have Langston Hughes's own feelings. I don't know what that means. You've got to be specific. Okay, so if we start analyzing our own writing and that of our classmates for these kinds of specific references, it's going to improve your writing so much, and it's going to get you an A in the class if you continue to do this sort of thing. We really haven't moved forward. So this is going to be one of our major goals for this class. So it's going to help you get full credit with your assignments in here, but it's also going to help you when you write in college and beyond. It's also going to help you on the advanced placement test if you decide to take it. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Thanks for paying attention. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.